Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic, let's do it. What's your creepiest glitch in reality moment you've ever experienced? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I used to work in a shop 5 minutes away from my house. I could leave at the last possible minute and still make it in time. I would leave my house, turn onto the road, head down to the high street, and find the shop right on the corner. 5 minutes walk. Less than that if I speed walked or jogged. One day I left my house at 10 to 6 in the morning, due to the start of my shift at 6 a.m. I closed the door behind me, turned onto the road, and started to head down toward the high street as usual. About halfway, my phone started ringing. It was my manager wanting to know where I was because it was 8 a.m. and she'd had to open the shop on her own. The request came as a complete surprise to me, as I had left my house a few minutes prior. Feeling very confused, I explained I had slept through my alarm but was on my way in now. I hung up the phone, saw I had received a text from my husband, who had just arrived at his place of employment, asking me if I was okay because I'd left nearly 2 hours ago and hadn't let him know I'd gotten in safely. As far as I was aware, I'd only been out of my house for a few minutes. There was no way I had been out of there for nearly 2 hours. It wasn't the right time of year for the clocks to have gone forward or back. Even if it was, phones do that automatically. My alarm went off as usual, and I knew what time it was when I left because I checked on my watch. I started to think maybe I had passed out on the way and not realized it, or disassociated or something, but being that close to the high street on a main thoroughfare to the train station, somebody would have found me if I had been out cold on the pavement for that long. The only thing I really remember about the day was the feeling that something wasn't right, and I couldn't tell anybody, as they wouldn't have believed me because it was so strange. So I just felt massively confused and frustrated. And yes, I was completely sober. I don't drink or take drugs. I unwittingly made someone else think they were experiencing a glitch in the Matrix. When I was a teen, my parents, who were divorced, still lived very close to each other, 5 minutes walking distance. It was during summer, when I was home alone, that some guy running for mayor was going door to door for his campaign. I answered and told him my parents were out, and he went on his way. Later in the day, I walked over to my mom's house, and the guy was now knocking on the door here, and when I answered, he was visibly shocked and stammered a bit, before giving me the same speech he had given me in the morning. I once again told him my parents were out, but neglected to tell him I was in fact the same kid he saw earlier. He left looking very confused. My boyfriend and I were in the car. We were driving on the highway, and we both swore we weren't driving long. But when I realized I didn't recognize the exits anymore, I opened my Maps app and set it to take us home. We were so far off track, it felt completely impossible to both of us when we saw our real location. The time we had driven versus the distance we traveled, it just wasn't right. I wasn't even speeding. We talked about it the whole way home. Never will forget that. My best friend and I were sitting at a bus stop in Los Angeles on a relatively busy road, chatting and watching the people as cars passed by. Out of nowhere, a man in Viking attire appears in the middle of the road, yelling in a confused manner, waving a stick in the air. Weird stuff happens in LA all the time, but we both had been watching our surroundings, and this guy had not been present the moment before. We never could explain how he just manifested in the middle of traffic, but it almost felt like he accidentally passed through some tear in the space-time continuum. It was very Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Around 15 years ago, I was in Central Station, Glasgow, waiting for my train home. It was after rush hour, so the place was relatively quiet, with maybe a few dozen people milling around. Now, the rows of seating in Central at that time ran parallel to each other, back to back, and I was sitting quite happily listening to music and reading my book when the hairs on the back of my neck pricked up and a shiver ran down my spine. I turned to my left to see what looked like an exact duplicate of me doing the exact same thing 2 seats up and on the opposite side. We were identical. Face, hairstyle, glasses, clothes, every detail was the exact same, even down to reading the same book. It happened in a flash, but as soon as eye contact was made, we both seemed to panic and look away. When I turned around again a moment later, my doppelganger was gone. I stood up to look for him, but there was no trace, and given the amount of people still in the area, the layout of the seating, and honestly his size, there was no way he was able to just run off without being seen. I was 50-50 split between amazement and shock, and I still feel the same way to this day. I and my partner recently lost our cat. On the second night, we had gone to bed and lay in bed holding each other, whilst numbing ourselves watching something on TV, as it was too quiet without her. Almost at the same time, we felt a cold breeze, no window open. We had covers over us, wash over us, and it felt as if an electric sensation was walking all over our feet and legs. Both of us at the same time. It was as if our cat was back and energetic and excited to see us. The fact it happened to both of us was amazing. I would have just thought it was my mind playing tricks on me. She was incredibly ill toward the end of her life, and it felt like she was telling us she was okay and free from pain. We were both experiencing a mix of joy and sadness, leading to tears. Grief is very powerful. Not a glitch in the Matrix, but a creepy deja vu moment happened to me earlier this month. I woke up one morning in a cold sweat and my heart was absolutely racing. I had a nightmare that, locally to me, there was a helicopter accident. I texted the guy I was seeing at 6:30 in the morning, telling him that I didn't sleep very well. I had a nightmare about a helicopter crash. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we are all crowded around the windows in our office that overlook the Hudson River. Someone in our kitchen had seen the helicopter that crashed and fell out of the sky into the Hudson River right outside our office. When I was a young kid, we were on a road trip and camping along the way. At one stop, I was picking wildflowers besides the rest area, and suddenly there was a little girl there. She said, "Flowers? For me?" And I said, "They're for my mom and dad." Then she simply vanished. I looked all over but didn't see her. I remember things being really weird, too. The lighting appeared strange, and the air felt unfamiliar. I swear it happened, along with seeing what looked like a bear getting into someone's car like it was a person while I was looking for this little girl. But I've always been a really vivid dreamer, and when I was young, I had a really hard time differentiating between my dreams and a real-life business. They were so detailed. I was convinced that some things I dreamt about were real, despite accusations of lying. I just didn't know the difference. And knowing what I know now, I believe I was lucid dreaming my way through childhood. This event was about 20 years ago. I and my then boyfriend were babysitting for a friend. The baby was fast asleep, and we watched a movie, had food, etc. Around 10 p.m. we saw the car headlights pull into the driveway. You could see from the living room window. The car was an old VW Beetle and had a very distinctive engine sound. We turned off the movie and got ready to open the door for our friend. We heard the car door shut and footsteps coming to the door, gravel driveway. I opened the front door, and there was no one there, no car, nothing. I called my boyfriend to come and see, and as I was really confused. While we were both on the doomsday and my doorstep, my friend's car pulled in the drive She got out of the car, and we heard the exact same noises that we had heard a minute previously. It was so strange, like we had heard the sounds before they happened. My youngest and I have shared a dream together a few times. The first time it happened, I woke up very upset from a bad nightmare, which was about him missing morning, and I'm in a home that was puzzle-like. It was early in the morning, so I wrote it down to calm myself. I've always dreamed vividly and remember them usually. He was sleeping over at my parents', and my mom later called in that day to tell me about him waking up crying hysterically. He told her what he dreamt, which was exactly what I dreamed from my perspective. It's happened a lot, and it's comforting knowing that we're connected so closely. I can always predict when my oldest needs me while she's off attending college. My middle kid, my father, and I will crave the same things that we haven't eaten in ages on the same day. I find these all so interesting, and you try to find some logical, rational explanation for things, and I don't know, some of them seem pretty out there and odd. What are some of yours? 3 years ago, I was driving to work. I started work at 5:30 a.m., so I was driving in the dark, gross. It was a 50-minute trip, and I would always leave at 4:30 a.m., getting to work at 5:20. I'd been driving on the freeway for just under 20 minutes, which was normal, as my exit was 20 minutes from home. I'd always get off the freeway at 4:50 a.m. The exit before mine came up, which is when I looked at the clock in the car to know I was on time. The exits were lit up as it was still dark, so it was obvious when one was coming up. My exit wasn't far, so I was waiting to turn off, but my exit never came. I was paying attention because I knew I had to pull off at that time, so I wasn't mindlessly driving. The exit after my exit is quite a distance away, so I just had to keep driving and knew I'd be late for work, as I was adding at least another 15 minutes to my trip. I was so confused as to how I missed my exit. I was paying attention, the time frame lined up, but the exit just disappeared. I had to drive quite a distance to be able to get off the next exit, turn around, get back on the freeway. I wasn't speeding to make up time, as I'd accepted that I'd be late for work, so there was no point in rushing. And I hate rushing, which is why I'm always early for work. After doing all that, and adding extra time and distance to my trip, I still made it to work at 5:20 a.m. There's no possible way this could have happened. I was glancing at the clock every now and then. It was working, but it was like time was moving slower. I have no idea what happened that morning. I was in a funk for the rest of the day thinking about it, and I still think about it even now and then. I'm at a loss for words. I was traveling to my in-laws with my newborn son 16 years ago. Husband left work late. I was anxious and chalked it up to postpartum and lack of sleep. I said I didn't want to hit the road then. I had a bad feeling. We obviously still left as planned. Me in the back with baby, just on the other side of the Huguenot Tunnel. The truck a few meters ahead of us had some of its load. Husband swerved and was able to miss it. A few hours later, I said that at our next stop I'd like to move to the front seat since baby had been sleeping since his last feed. He always slept well in a moving car with a rear-facing seat. Around 9 p.m. we stopped for fuel. I went to the loo, and a vagrant followed me and wouldn't leave me alone. I went back to the car and said I'll just stay in the back because I don't want to wait for the stuff in front to be moved so that I could sit there. We left, and half an hour later, a deer, Kudu Bill, ran straight at the car from the other side of the road, retracted by headlights. Husband braked, and it was jumping, and it went through the windshield, hooves first, hitting the passenger side, headrest at full impact. That vagrant actually saved my life. Then 9 years ago, while at work, I had a sudden urge to reach out to my nephew. I couldn't get a hold of him. When I left work, I phoned my sister and asked if he's okay. I couldn't get a hold of him. She said as far as she knew he was fine. She phoned me back a few minutes later. There had been an incident at his workplace, and he'd been held at gunpoint during a robbery. He was roughed up a bit and was left tied up, but he was fine after medical treatment. I was walking home late one night with my boyfriend when we saw a bigger guy sitting at one of the bus stops. We couldn't see his face because it was dark, but we crossed the street before getting too close. He got up from the bus stop and walked slowly, as if he were old or hurt. But then, we were on opposite sides of the street ahead of him, but we ran off the main street and lost sight of him. We had run a few blocks, but we wanted to get back on the main street so we could get home. And right when we got there, the same guy was right there walking on the other side of the road. We kept running until we were almost home. We never got close enough to see his face or age, but man, I was around 16 at the time and was worn out after those few blocks. I don't know how he caught up with us, but it still creeps me out. As with most working people, I drive the same commute to and from work every day. And as most smallish towns, I generally see the same vehicles pretty consistently on my commute. One morning I was waiting at a red light when a semi-truck with a bright red cab and branded trailer I'd never seen before pulled onto the highway from a tiny plaza just down the road from the intersection. I remembered taking notice because I'd never heard of the brand on the trailer before. Some kind of cough drop. And there were only small clothing boutiques, a coffee shop, and a nail salon in the plaza where the truck pulled out. Not somewhere that a giant semi-truck transporting cough drops would really be needed, but whatever. It's a Monday, and it's not that interesting. So I watch as the semi passes through the intersection in front of me. An identical semi-truck follows immediately, trailing 2 cars behind. Same red cab, same weird branded trailer. Okay. That's a weird coincidence. Oh wait, there's a third identical semi-truck right behind the second one. Damn, okay, that's weird. But it's still Monday and it's still not that interesting. So off I go, my lights turn green, and I make my way into work. I usually pick up a coffee and a bagel in the drive-thru before I head in. So I spend my $7 and think I've forgotten about the weird red trucks. Until I pull into the parking lot at work. There's another truck. The truck in question is identical to the previous one. The truck is parked in the alleyway behind my building. I'm being haunted by red cough drop trucks. Like shit, dude. Did God run out of unique assets for this playthrough? After my mom's funeral, I brought home a helium balloon from the service. She wanted it to be like a party, not a wake. It had the little sandbag thing at the end to keep it in place. It was in the house for about a week, slowly losing its ability to stay afloat. I'd say hi, Mom, each time I went by it, before going to work. I see it's almost touching the ground. It was kind of like the end of morning, and I knew when I got home I'd have to get rid of the balloon. All day I was thinking about the balloon, and how I was going to have to put it in the garbage. That didn't seem right after associating the balloon with my mom. I wasn't sure how I was going to dispose of it, maybe just put it in the closet instead of the garbage. I get home and walk to where the balloon had been all week. It's not there. No helium left, no open windows, no sign of a deflated balloon with a sandbag attached. I started laughing and happy crying. Thanks, Mom. I was once driving past an area where my previous job had rented out a building. I was with my partner who had been inside that building as well, so they knew where it was and what it looked like. As we go past, I look out the window, and it's completely leveled. Like no buildings, no parking lot, nothing. Just a flat plot of dirt. We both commented on how crazy it was that they just knocked the whole complex down, and we talked about it most of the way home. I even told an old coworker who I was still friends with at the time that I had seen this. We drive past the same spot a few weeks later, and the building is there. The exact same building. Exactly how it was before. It was obvious it had not been knocked down, because how else could we explain the building still being up? But we both were so sure we saw it completely gone one day. We both still have no idea how we saw the same thing that wasn't real. When I was around 7 years old, circa 2003, my mom asked me to walk to the mailbox and grab the mail. We had a long driveway and a fenced-in yard. Well, as I started walking up my driveway, I started to feel odd. I noticed all the ambient noise went away, no birds, no wind, nothing. This was a sunny day in California, so it was weird. As I was getting closer to the mailbox, I noticed our next-door neighbor, an elderly woman, was walking up her driveway too. So I get to my mailbox, gathered the mail, shuffled through it in a moment, and turned to see where my neighbor was. She was in the same exact spot I saw her in earlier. But what was shocking to me was she was mid-stride, like frozen in time with one leg up as if taking her next step. It freaked me out, so I started walking back home quickly, and as I got down my driveway, I looked over again and she had made it to her mailbox. I have dreams that come true a lot. Sometimes someone says something to me the next day or week that I had already dreamt about. Alternatively, a scenario I dreamed of might come true involving a person from my past, present, or even future. It happens a lot, about every other week to month. Once I had a lot of signs randomly pop up when my ex was about to reach out to me after a year of no contact. I kept running into people that looked like him, and at my job, one guy with the same name had the same birthday when I was signing them up for our store of rewards. Then when I was driving, our favorite song came on in my car, and that time on the car radio, as soon as it played, was his birthday date, and all those things happened in a short span of 2 days. Then the next day, he randomly called. I was in my bedroom in my house, and it was in the middle of the afternoon. I had one large window with black curtains, so it was really dark, helps me sleep, and I was lying in bed for a quick nap. I'm almost asleep when suddenly I hear a quick draft and a bunch of clothes I had piled up on the nightstand next to my window fell over, and I heard a splat. I turn on the lights and look at the nightstand, and there's a small puddle of water on it. There were no leaks in my roof. It was in the summer, so there had been no rain, and the ceiling was so high that even if a bunch of water seeped through, it wouldn't have made a nice puddle in the corner of my nightstand. Also, I had absolutely no glass of water or water bottles anywhere, as my window was closed, so I don't know where that draft or small gust of wind came from. It was so eerie. I wish I had the lights on and wasn't half asleep, so I could see exactly what the hell happened in real time. I had to park on the side of the street for several minutes because I arrived at my destination too early. It was a fairly busy street in a New York City borough. Something caught my eye in the rearview mirror. I saw a tall person wearing layers of black clothes walking with a strange gait in the direction of my car. They seemed to be slowly walking in a diagonal but still appeared to be gaining noticeable distance. To be fair, there was nothing unusual to see in New York, so I went back to scrolling on my phone. A minute or so later, I'm getting ready to exit my car and happen to look up again in my rear view, only to see that the same person walking the exact same way in the same spot. I watched a bit longer this time, as I was perplexed. They continued to walk as if coming closer but never actually went forward. They were in constant motion, on the odd diagonal angle, and never shifted off the street or gained distance when it appeared obvious that they should have. I ended up getting out of my car, and that person wasn't there when I returned later. Last August, so definitely not even around daylight savings, I woke up at 9:05 in the morning and got up to use the bathroom, did not shower. The commotion woke up my mom, who met me in the living room where we had a short conversation, and I went back to my room. I immediately sat down at my desk, didn't get dressed or anything else, and again checked the time on my computer, 10:45. I glanced at my phone and it remained unchanged. Weirded out, I went back to the living room and told my mom, expecting her to call me crazy, but she said the same thing happened to her, and she was freaked out but didn't want to tell me. The only explanation I can come up with is because we were relying on internet-connected devices to tell time. The Wi-Fi had been somehow disconnected at one time, and us checking them made them reconnect and jump to the correct time. That's really not how the clock works, and it's still way later than either of us usually sleep in, but it's all I got.